Okay, I wanted to do one about bending. Bending is one of those technical aspects of playing that will really kind of distinguish um, a beginner or intermediate player from a better player. Um, and I want to maybe make 2 points about technique, um, and then one kind of just tip, one little device for maybe making your playing sound a little more interesting. Um, so the first thing is um, where you actually put your finger on the string when you bend and how you bend. And so, in electric guitar, we wrap our thumb around for as an anchor, as a leverage point. So that's the first thing. That's obvious. Then the other thing, of course, is that you can try to bend with one finger, but it's always better to add one or two fingers underneath for support, for extra weight under the string to push. Um, and I will also say, bends don't have to always be up. If you watch a video of Hendrix, he bent he bent he bent down a whole lot more than I ever imagined until I saw video of him. I couldn't believe it. Especially when he was on lower strings. Obviously, you can't bend up. He bent a lot on lower strings, bent down toward the floor. But if you're bending up, um, one little trick that I learned from Kimmock was rather than what most people do is they kind of center the string in the middle of the pad of their fingertip. Um, and what he taught me to do, and that works, a lot of guys do it. But if you know anything about Kimmock's rig over the years, he played on his white Strat, the 65 or 66 Strat. Um, he strung that thing with 14 on the top, I think 22 on the B, and a wound G of some ridiculous gauge, all the way up to I guess 64 on the low E. I mean, these are basically, he took a set of mediums, threw out the E string, moved everything down uh, a string, and then put on a 64 or a 65 on the low E. So these are super heavy strings, and yet you watch video of them, and the guy could bend like crazy. He could bend all day in big intervals. He could bend, not just whole step. And the secret is to get more flesh behind the string. So rather than right on top of the string, or worse yet, kind of lower on your finger, he gets his finger almost off the string, below it, so that there's a huge amount of finger sort of beneath, up against the fretboard. And then he has the two fingers for support in the back. And so and if you do that, you can hold that string up all day. He actually used to have we used to have contests where to see how long we could hold a bent note. And, it's kind of like the Marines, when they punish people, they make them hold buckets out to the side in each arm. Well, that's what this was. And, we'd sit and stare at each other until somebody gave. And of course, he always won. His hands were way stronger than mine. But, he could stand and just hold it forever, really. Now, and so that's a little tip for adding strength and security to your bends. Now, you do find, I don't know if it's going to focus enough to see, but you have a lower, in that third finger there, there's a lower slot and then a higher slot, and that higher slot is where the proper technique, where I grab that string. You do find that if you practice that at first, your fingertip may kind of come away and hurt a little bit. It'll kind of pull away from the nail, and it does hurt at first, but that's the pain you endure for a good technique. It'll eventually toughen, just like your calluses toughen. You'll eventually, it won't hurt after a while. So that's one thing about how to actually bend. And then the other thing I sort of implied already, there's nothing that gives away a beginner more than bending to some note that doesn't really work. So, if you're in, let's just do this whole thing in like A Dorian, A minor. And, if you're in the blues scale in the blues box. And let me add as an aside, you can do a lot with that blues box. If you watch Hendrix on the famous Band of Gypsys Machine Gun, the one that made the record, and there's a video of it. If you watch that video, he's probably up here in that E pentatonic blues box, probably 90-95% of the tune. And because he has the imagination that he had, it's one of the great solos of all time. And part of that was his bending technique too, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So you want to, in general, as a beginner especially, you want to hit the targets. And what I used to do is I used to sit in front of a tuner and I would bend. And so if I was bending from D to E, I wanted to make sure that was an E on the tuner. And you can use your open strings if your guitar's nice and tuned. I'm using the open E here to gauge whether my bend is really an E, and generally it is. And of course you can cover up a little bit with a little shake. So anyway, use a tuner, find your target, and then practice bending up and staying and hitting that note. So the final thing is, and I'm sorry if that's real obvious, but again, it's something a lot of people don't pay enough attention to, and it really stands out. It just takes a lot of practice and kind of connecting your hands to your ears. And so the final thing is just a little technique about bending that might make your playing sound a little more interesting. So let's say we're in little improv from the old Santana. Zappa called it the Santana mystical chord progression or something like that. Just A minor. Okay. And so when you go from A minor to D, that usually implies a D or an A Dorian. Okay. So one thing you can do, you don't have to bend. You want to bend to a note that's in the scale, that's in tune. Unless you're far more advanced and can do microtonal stuff. But you don't have to bend from a note in the scale. Garcia did this a whole bunch. He came from, so like here's A, that's the root. Well, there's A flat or G sharp. That's not in the pentatonic, the typical kind of thing, typical scale you'd play, but he would start a half step under. Whoops. So you could do, so like this D to E, instead of D to E, you could go E flat to E. Instead of G to E or G to A, you could go A flat to A. Instead of A to B, you could go B flat to B. anyway, you know. So there you go. Just a quick little lesson on bends. Keep practicing. Get those fingers toughened up. Thanks.